Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the September 17th meeting of the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management. We should get Waste Management to sponsor the committee, and then the Waste Management can actually be the logo, and we can actually make money. So to begin the meeting, I just want to, we have quorum, even though Councillor Egli and Councillor McKenney are standing up. No respect. I'm like Rodney Dangerfield up here. You know? It's enough. You don't have a mic, so your jokes are not heard, which make them not funny. So, a declaration of interest. Seeing none. Confirmation of minutes from our two meetings of June 2019, the Tuesday, June 18th meeting, as well as the special meeting on Tuesday, June 25th. Are those minutes carried? Carried. Thank you. So we're going to go run through the consent, the agenda first, but then we're adding an update, but we'll run through the agenda first, which will add actually as item number 1, but we'll run through the regular agenda first. So item number 1, status update, Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management, inquires the motions for the period ending 6 September 2019. That the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management receive this report for information. Is that item received? Thank you. Item number 2, the reaffirmation of the schoolyard tree program. That the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management recommend Council reaffirm the schoolyard tree planting grant program for the remaining term of Council as per the corporate grant and contribution policy. Is that item carried? Thank you. Item number 3 is a financial statements for in-house solid waste collection, external audit results 2018. We have a presentation on that. Items number 4 and 5 are actually going to be brought together. We have a joint presentation that'll touch on both. That's the lead pipe replacement program update, as well as the 2018 Drinking Water Quality Management System Annual Management Review Report and Operational Plan. So we'll hold items 3, 4, and 5. And item 6 is BRITANNIA Village, Ottawa River Flood Protection Amendment to the Memorandum of Understanding with the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. So I do want to acknowledge Councillor Kavanagh. Of course, this is located in Bay Ward. So before, I don't think we have any speakers or anything to speak to this item. So I will, if you'd like to say a few words right now before we go ahead, Councillor Kavanagh.
Okay, thank you. Just to say that this is very timely after the spring that we had and the flooding. I don't think anyone would argue that the berm was not played a major role in what happened this spring, and it was to the benefit of the community. It's a good reminder to remember that that this berm did not come out because it was a government project that was just implemented by people sitting around a table. It actually was a grassroots campaign by the residents who knew that this was a possibility, and they had to convince their neighbors that a 1 in 100-year flood could really happen. It was kind of like being Chicken Little with the sky is falling at first for those residents, and we eventually saw that they all signed on, and they have to pay for it. They were paying for it off their taxes, so this was not a freebie. But because of the delays, the cost went up, and I want to thank the province who actually intervened. I'll give some credit to Bob Shirelli, who actually came in at the very last moment to give that last bit of money so that berm could be built. And it was built, and we were all very happy that it was in time for the 2017 flood. And then it was tested again in 2019, so much for 1 in 100 year. It really reached those levels. It saw some damage. It was tested to the utmost. It was wind and storms, not just the water level. And it suffered some damage. So this money is very useful. I want to thank Rideau Valley Conservation Authority for their work. They worked very closely with the community. I particularly want to thank the community members who were there every single day working together, and all the community members who came out from all over the city to pile on those sandbags as, just as a precaution. It was up against the berm, and we learned a lot about berms and the effectiveness and how they work with sandbags. But in the end, we realized that a little more work has to be done, and this is very, very welcome. The community will continue to work with the city and with the Rideau Valley Conservation Area on this funding. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Yes, I think members of council, certainly if you've been around for the last 8 years, are well aware of this project as it came through council, also through the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority Board, which I've been on since 2012. And so Tara Davidson is here representing the RVCA. So thank you for your comments. I got to say, with this 2019 flood and all of a sudden the berm's there and you're elected, you've achieved a lot more in the last few months than any councillor prior to 2010 achieved his entire lifetime. That's only funny, I guess, if you know who the councillor was prior to 2010 in Bayward. Someone should pipe in crickets. Someone needs to pipe in the noise of crickets. All right, so the report then is that the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management recommend Council approve an amendment to Britannia Village Ottawa River Flood Protection Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Ottawa and Rideau Valley Conservation Authority to increase the investment by $500,000 to further investigate and undertake repairs as a result of the spring 2019 flood event. So just some minor repairs to the berm. It's clearly been beneficial, as expressed by Councillor Kavanagh, 2017-2019. So on this report? Carried. Thank you. So we'll move. We have a motion from the Vice Chair to add a verbal update on the Zone 1 collection matters.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. So that pursuant to subsection 89.3 of the procedure bylaw, that Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management waive the rules of procedure to add a verbal update regarding Zone 1 solid waste collection service issues on today's agenda, and that pursuant to subsection 83.4a of the procedure bylaw, the committee dispense with the requirement for staff to provide a separate written report on this verbal update presentation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Menard. Is carried on the item to add. So we're going to move that right up to the beginning. Okay. So we'll deal with that right now. And I'd like to invite staff up from the relevant departments in terms of solid waste services, our Chief Procurement Officer, Will McDonald. So as members will recall, at the council meeting last week, we were discussing the next collection contract for Zone 1. Of course, we have some existing matters going on in Zone 1. We were trying to separate the discussion on the two to focus purely on the contract at council and isolate the concerns that the councillors have, and of course the residents of the West End in Zone 1 have with regard to the collection contract currently and Waste Management's performance in recent months. So we wanted to give councillors the opportunity and staff the opportunity to speak to the matter. So here at committee, which is an appropriate place for it. We also reached out to Waste Management on this, and the Vice President for Eastern Canada for Waste Management, Aaron Johnson, was unable to be here this morning. He's actually going to be in town this afternoon and tomorrow, so he's offered the ability to meet with members of council that are affected in Zone 1. So we've relayed that to Councillors Gower and El-Shantiri and Kavanagh and Hubley and Suds and Shirelli, as well as myself, who's also a Zone 1 councillor. But I do have a letter that he did provide me as well. So I just want to read that before we start anywhere. So this, again, is from Aaron Johnson, who is the Area Vice President for Waste Management of Canada Corporation. So to the Standing Committee on Environment Protection, Water and Waste Management, I'd like to thank the committee for the invitation to attend this meeting. Due to prior commitments, I'm unable to be there this morning, but will make myself available this evening or tomorrow in Ottawa to answer questions and provide an update on staffing and equipment. If this is of interest, I asked Scott Moffat, that's me, coordinates the session and participants, which we have begun the coordination of. First, I would like to apologize for the service interruptions. I'm happy to report that as of yesterday, we are completely caught up and no longer experiencing collection delays. We are thankful for the assistance that the City of Ottawa, Miller Waste, and our employees from Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia, and across Ontario have provided. We are in discussions with Miller Waste in order to provide a seamless transition, and will be meeting with city staff later this week to present that plan. We thank the residents for their patience, and again would like to apologize for the delays. Respectfully, Aaron Johnson. So I've shared that letter with staff. I will share that with the members of council as well, and I just want to provide an opportunity now for members of the committee impacted by Zone 1, and I know several of you are here who are not on the committee, to have any questions. Did you want to, Marilyn, did you want to touch on anything beforehand? I believe legal wanted to provide a couple comments too. I think that the important thing here today is to focus on what's happening in Zone 1 and how are we going to transition in the next few months. So council last week made the decision that we'd be transitioning from waste management to Miller, separate from this issue, just merely a contracting matter, but what happens between now and then. And at council, I know Will, Marilyn, Kevin Wiley were very clear that we'd be working with Waste Management and Miller Waste, as well as our in-house team, to help that transition and to make sure that our main objective is to collect waste in Zone 1 and to not let our residents have to sit there with their waste on the end of their lanes. So did you want to provide any comments from legal regarding today?
Good morning, councillors. My name is Chris Merrick. I'm a lawyer with Legal Services. I've been assisting Marilyn and her group with this matter. I just wanted to say two things, really, before we get started. And the first point that I'll speak to is of a more general, in nature, and that is that in discussing waste management this morning in this venue, we should take care and be reasonable with the statements that are made. We want to ensure that we're fair and that we have a reasonable basis for the statements that are made here today. Now, the second thing that I wanted to say is a little more specific, and it speaks to the more specific issue of the causes of the performance issues. So we've heard Waste Management's explanation as to why they're having performance issues. We've also heard different comments and rumors as to what the causes of those issues may be. But I think this morning it is more productive and not to speculate on those reasons. And that's basically the two comments I wanted to make. I will turn the presentation over to Marilyn, and I remain available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I think it's important to raise that. I mean, we're not here to malign any certain company. We're not here to focus on the past. It's about how do we make sure that we're taking care of our constituents, our residents of the City of Ottawa, and how do we do that going forward, and how do we work with staff and our other contractors to achieve that goal. So I want to make sure that we're clear on that, so that that's what we're here to talk about today, and that we move forward in that with that frame of mind. So Marilyn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. So further to the council meeting on Wednesday, we were asked to come back and give a briefing on the transition plan for the contract. So I'm happy to be here this morning. I'm here with my colleagues. This is Nancy Greenfield, who is the Director of Service Ottawa, Jonathan Hamilton, who's the Program Manager in Solid Waste Services for the waste collection contracts, and Will McDonald, who's the Chief Procurement Officer. So, as I said, I'm here to give a status update on the collection issues that are being experienced in Zone 1 in the city's West End. We're also, it's all changed. As committee will recall from recent discussions, Waste Management, Inc. has been contracted with the city to provide residential waste collection services for Zone 1 since October 2012. As can be seen from the map, Zone 1 is situated in the west end of the city and has the following wards: Canada North, which is Ward 4, West Carleton March, which is Ward 5, Stittsville, Ward 6, and Canada South, Ward 23. It also has portions of the Bay Ward, which is Ward 7, College Ward, which is Ward 8, and Rideau-Goulburn, which is Ward 21. While some of these wards started experiencing collection issues more recently, the majority of the service issues began to surface in late April 2019. Since that time, city staff and senior management have held frequent meetings and conference calls with Waste Management staff, including calls with the company's president, in an attempt to address the various issues and ensure service delivery to the residents in Zone 1. These conversations are ongoing, and we are committed to actively working with Waste Management until the end of the contract, which is in May 31st, 2020, and to ensure the performance of the contract is met. On that note, I would like to now pass things over to Will McDonald to discuss the contract management measures related to this specific contract.
Mr. Chair, the contract defines a standard of performance as the completion of 100% of each day's collection on that day. And the city has been strictly enforcing that standard of performance since the contract was awarded, and has been assessing liquidated damages where, as set out in the contract, where that performance has not been met. The city's contract administration policy also outlines the processes and steps in escalation associated with a supplier performance issue. In accordance with this policy, staff in solid waste have been working with Waste Management to address the service levels since the issue arose in April of this year, culminating in a formal letter of non-performance being issued in June. Staff in solid waste and Waste Management continue to work in good faith to develop a satisfactory cure to their non-performance and the issues identified in the June letter. The contract includes a list of over 40 events subject to liquidated damages ranging from $250 to $10,000 per incident. The list includes issues such as the failure to complete 100% of the day's collections performed outside of specified time, or the failure to clean spillage. The list of incidents is not exhaustive. Non-performance events that are not specifically outlined in the contract are subject to liquidated damages on a cost recovery basis. To date, the city has issued approximately $213,000 in liquidated damages since the contract was awarded. In addition, the city can require that the contractor pay for all charges incurred by the city as a result of their non-performance, including the cost of other contractors or city personnel to deliver the work. The contract also permits the city to retain amounts owing to the contractor to guarantee the payment of amounts incurred by the city. And should the amount retained by the city be insufficient to cover the city's costs, the city can enforce its claim against the contractor or its surety, and the city holds a $1 million performance security to this effect. However, to date, Waste Management has been a willing partner and has continued to pay liquidated damages when invoiced by the city. I'll now pass it to Nancy Greenfield to discuss 311.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in an effort to support your residents when they have disruptions in service, we've made a number of changes that we hope will facilitate their ability to contact the city a little bit easier. So what we have done for now is we have made it the #1 topic on ottawa.ca so that they can immediately go in, click on the link, they can go in, they can report their missed garbage pickup, which will then transition directly back to Public Works so that they are aware. We've made that same link available on your councillor's portal. That will help you and your staff. If residents are calling you directly, you can go in and you can either direct them to ottawa.ca or take that information yourselves and get it to Public Works immediately. For those who do choose to call 311, we've implemented a courtesy callback. What that allows them to do is that it allows them to select call me back, so you don't have to wait on the line for however long to report that your garbage has been missed, so people do find that more helpful. With respect to communications, we've tightened up the process to make sure that when we're notified that garbage is being missed, that we're alerting Public Works immediately. They're providing us that messaging, and then we've tightened up the process to make sure that what our agents know, what goes on our IVR, what Public Works changes on the website, what PIMR tweets out on our behalf is consistent so that there isn't, different messaging going out on different channels. The last thing that we have done is we have an app called Recollect, which provides you those notifications that says, when is your garbage being picked up? Is it blue bin this week? Is it black bin this week? That app actually allows Public Works, and they have access to it, to be able to notify residents in the zone specifically when their garbage has been missed. So we can tell them, we know your garbage has been missed, we're coming out. Leave your garbage out tonight, leave your garbage out tomorrow morning at 9, or whatever the process is going to be. So we do have a direct line to people who do have that app, and so we are encouraging, your residents, and if you can encourage to get that app, to download that app from the Apple Store or from the Android store, and then you can put that on your phone and get real-time notifications.
Thank you, Nancy. From an operational standpoint, solid waste staff, the in-house collections group, and Miller Waste Systems have done everything within available resources to assist with minimizing service issues in the West End. And these efforts will continue until Zone 1 collection is transitioned to Miller Waste Systems, if necessary. Given the severity and the nature of the service disruptions, the General Manager of Public Works and Environmental Services has committed to the following department-wide activities to support solid waste mitigations efforts: the temporary seconding of former solid waste staff from roads, parks, and water services to support Zone 1 collection efforts, temporary utilization of parks mini packer units to assist with curbside recycling and organics collection. And beyond these initiatives, as the Director of Solid Waste Services, I've also recently secured the services of 3 additional waste collection vehicles from a private waste management company until the end of October. We're also in the process of leasing 3 trucks that will be available starting the beginning of November. Lately, discussions with senior management from Miller Waste Systems are currently underway to examine the feasibility of expediting the transition period. In our view, this arrangement would be the most effective tool in minimizing further service disruptions in Zone 1. And we are committed to working with both Waste Management and Miller Systems to facilitate this transition at the earliest opportunity. In the interim, however, we will continue to actively work with Waste Management as they implement their corrective action plan. I'd like to thank members of committee for allowing us to provide this update, and I welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you, and thank you for providing the update and for doing it in a relative short notice from last week's council meeting. So I do have a few councillors that would like to pose questions. I'll start with Councillor Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the staff for that update. A couple of questions. I think we covered a lot at council, so I won't go on too long here. But taking the advice from the lawyer that if you don't want to speculate on what the causes were, then I think we need a report from staff that digs into what were the actual causes, because we were giving messages during these delays that, at one point there had been a fire and that was impacting the delivery. There was another one that said they were missing mechanics, and then we heard they were losing staff. So if Legal Services is considering that speculation, then I'd like to see staff actually do a report, hopefully in cooperation with Waste Management, because I think we need to learn some lessons here. This, it's everything you're talking about doing right now is great, but residents in Councillor Gower's ward and my ward and others have been living this since Easter. There's been some gaps in between where things get working well, but then as we saw recently, the wheels come off the truck again. So I think it's very important, and if you don't feel comfortable doing it or you think you're too close into it, then let me know, because I'll ask the Auditor General to do it. Because we have to do a dive into what happened here, and we have to get the facts so that we learn a lesson and that the public knows that we looked into what happened here and we're going to do things to make sure it doesn't happen again. So do you feel comfortable doing that, or would you prefer that I formally request the Auditor General?
Well, why don't we, perhaps it might be best to take that away and figure out who would be, because I do think it's important. I mean, we're not talking about a company that has a long history of having compliance issues, right?
They have over a decade of excellent service,
That's right.
Mr. Chair, in my ward. I can vouch for them. I know for years, any issues we had, they dealt with them quickly. I can sing their praises just as much as I can point out to some of the problems that we've experienced over the last few months. What I'm more concerned about is getting to the root of what caused this, to make sure that we don't do it again, that it doesn't happen somewhere else in the city. For example, I really like the steps that Nancy Greenfield was talking about. We spoke right after council about this. That was one of the issues that my residents experienced, because we were being told by solid waste staff to tell people to leave the garbage at the curb, yet 311's message was, we'll get back to you in 5 days. So, totally different. What do they do with their garbage for 5 days while they wait for us to get back to them? So 311 is only as good as the information we give them. I think part of this report that I'm asking staff to look at would be to look at their communications when issues like this happen. Who's going to get the message to 311 so that they can then give it properly to the residents? It was a breakdown. I had highlighted it several times with staff. So I think it's time for them to go in and take a look at that and get something in place before this happens again. Because Nancy's group can do all they want to do to try to improve this. They're only as good as what we give them. I'd also like to know, Marilyn mentioned about different levels of escalation. At what point will the ward councillor be advised that there's issues in that ward?
Mr. Chair, at the end of every service day, Waste Management has been providing us with information, so basically maps showing what streets were left behind. My staff have then been forwarding those maps to the impacted councillors. So we've endeavored to do that on a daily basis so that the information is out. That same information is also provided to 311 staff.
So that will be the process going forward across the city if there's any issues where, you get, like for example, flooding, we say 40 houses, it escalates. So with garbage, every week you're going to have a house that gets missed for one reason or another. I don't think that necessarily has to be escalated, but have you set a level where you're going to take an escalated step here?
Yes, you are correct. So when a whole street is missed, for example, we will be forwarding that information on to you as we receive it from Waste Management.
Okay. And so so you're going to take it away about the report and you're going to get back to us, because I want this information, with all due respect to legal services advice, I'm here to represent residents, I'm not here to represent the city, so I'm going to be asking the tough questions because they want the answers. So whatever you decide to do with this report, and I hope you make a decision soon on it, I want to be able to communicate that to my residents. So can I get a timeline on how long you need to decide what you can do?
Yep. Kevin Wiley?
Yeah, Chair, if I may, we'll endeavor to take it away and assess it. The councillor's speaking about some internal procedures, policies, whatever, mechanisms, and we can certainly look at those, and if there are gaps, Chair, in our internal policies and procedures, we'll report on those, no problem. We'll also liaise with Waste Management and, of course, our legal services, procurement services. I would suspect, though, it'll turn on whether Waste Management's comfortable in divulging information into the public realm. So barring that, if they're willing, fine. If not, then we'll come back with a memo to explain a way forward.
And I think in my discussions with Waste Management, they weren't overly interested in necessarily pointing fingers, or they just wanted to focus on next steps. How can we address this? How can we go forward? That's
I'm
my
looking
experience
for
with Waste Management
lessons
was that.
learned.
Fair enough.
I want to
Yeah.
know if we're going forward, that we've looked at what caused us to make sure we protect against it. That's why I'm not looking to lay blame here.
Fair.
That's not what I want in this report. I just want to know what really caused it, because again, deferring to the legal services advice, we don't want to speculate. And in order to avoid speculation, we need facts. So what caused it? What can we do to prevent it? That's what I'm looking for.
All right, thanks. So we'll take that away, work with Kevin, work with legal to sort the best way to come back out. Ideally, come back to this committee with a report as soon as we can. Any other questions? No? Councillor Gower.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the chair for allowing this item on the agenda today. It was short notice for staff. Also, I do think it's worth mentioning last week in Stittsville, at least on Thursday, we had a good day for garbage in that all the streets were picked up, so that's a positive. I want to kind of echo and build on something Councillor Hubley brought up, which is this is a really interesting case because it's a mixture of both our councillor's role as customer service, helping solve problems for residents, but it also brings into our role of oversight on staff and then staff's oversight on private companies that provide services for us. And I think, again, looking forward rather than placing blame, I think it would be useful to understand what the root causes of this were. Were there signs that were identified earlier on? Were there things that we missed? This problem didn't happen all at once. It appears that there are a lot of factors. I don't want to speculate too much at the advice of our legal colleagues, but understanding how we got to the point where we are today and looking forward to other waste contracts and other contracts that we have with the private sector, how can we avoid this happening in the future? Because this is a big problem. What I did want to ask was, we had a reasonably good week over the last week. Staff outlined some of the general measures, but what did it take from a city perspective to get that success last week? What city trucks were deployed? What effort from the city above and beyond what waste management was providing did that require to get that good week?
Mr. Chair, last week, the City of Ottawa basically threw all of our solid waste in-house collection groups' resources into Zone 1. So once we completed our services in the East End and the downtown core of the city, we redirected all of our trucks out to the West End. Miller Waste Systems did the same thing. On Wednesday, we started deploying mini packers from the parks into those areas to assist as well. 311 has been fully working with us to get the information out to the residents. So we really threw everything that we had at it into those two zones to ensure that service got caught up from the week before.
Is that now impacting the service to the other zones that the city provides, or what effect is it having?
Both Miller and the in-house group finished our collection services first, and then we redeployed our resources out to the West End at the end of the day.
Okay. I know that, last week at council, staff outlined a number of measures that waste management and the city are taking to resolve this. What I'm interested in, between now and the end of May, with a long time, how is staff monitoring the success of the measures that waste management is taking to improve the service?
By not receiving a map with missed streets, I think that is the primary focus at this point, is to ensure that all the streets are collected at the end of the day. As alluded, there are occasionally houses that are missed, and that would be business as usual, but if they're missing full streets, that's not an acceptable level of service. We have contract management tools, as Will McDonald was saying, that we have liquidated damages and other mechanisms within the contract to hold waste management's toes to the fire.
And I guess related to that is we do get the daily maps when there are streets missed in the affected wards, which is a good start. I suppose it's building on Councillor Hubley's request is around reporting. I'd like to know, what other reporting, what's next? Do we get another report a month or two from now coming to this committee or through council? Are there less formal reports that we get from staff? We've already touched on that through some of Councillor Hubley's questions, but I'd like to see an actual plan for how the success or lack of success, how are we doing? and how are we getting that information back to council, and how are we communicating that to the public? So echoing what Councillor Hubley's asked for, some, a plan for how we're reporting back to the public on the status of our waste collection from now until the end of May.
All right, we will take that away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think another part of that too is that any report to speak to what happened should also focus on our future procurement strategy with regard to our next collection contracts. The next ones, while we do have ones upcoming that are 3 years, come 2022, 2023, we're going to be looking at, a much longer contract, and we're going to want to make sure that we're avoiding any situation like this in the future with our future contractors. So thank you, Councillor Gower. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your presentations. I can see that a lot of work has been done since we've experienced these issues, and I appreciate it. I think we all took garbage collection for granted. It just, got done, and that happened for a long time, and then this spring that it didn't get done, and we had to relay information to our residents. I think the big thing that we needed was communication, because I found myself guessing, why something was missed. It was in the spring, we had the flood, we had a lot of stuff going on. So one-offs are okay, but when it kept happening, we needed information, and the city is pretty good about giving us information on a lot of things that, maybe I don't even necessarily need. I don't need the traffic reports every day, but this was something about our area, and during a weekend when people got garbage piling up, sitting out there, it was difficult to get information. And I'm glad to see the changes that have been made so that people can get their own information. I was feeling like there was a lot of efficiencies that were not looked into in terms of, it just seemed crazy to be putting in 311 calls for residents when it's entire neighborhoods that are affected, and yet we were doing it, and that's just not efficient, and it's not smart. We have better ways to do things. We know the whole neighborhood has not been collected, but I don't know why, and I don't know what communications to give to my residents. So it always takes a little bit of a crisis. I don't want to call it too much of a crisis, but to learn. We learned a lot about floods, this spring. We learned things from when things don't go so well. And I think we've learned a lot in respect to how to do communications better, so that people can get information quickly and get their own information if necessary. And hopefully going forward that will be the case. So I appreciate the efforts that have been made to fix these issues. I expect staff to be dealing with waste management. I'm not dealing with waste management. That's their job. We delegate that, and staff fix things that are wrong when it comes to it didn't get collected. But I just need the communications on what is going to happen and how we're fixing it. Sometimes things don't go well, so we have to have those messages, and we have to be ready to be honest and straightforward and quick. I think we've learned a lot on this, and so going forward, I look forward to have these efficiencies, because I think, frankly, it saves us a lot of money when we have to put staff on just to answer calls that everyone knows the answer to already, and if we get the message out beforehand, we're being preemptive, and that's very positive. So I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Chair. And thank you for the report. One of the things I just wanted to raise or ask a question about is whether or not we've had our in-house group experience these types of service disruptions that are occurring now with this private sector group in recent memory. Has that occurred with our in-house group ever in the past?
Mr. Chair, no, it has not. We've met service regularly.
Okay, thank you for that. And is it also true that our in-house group has saved the city money when compared to the same service that private sector operators have provided in certain zones?
We actually have a presentation on the in-house contracts coming up next.
Correct.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Councillor Hubley.
So if I could just add on to what Councillor Menard was suggesting there. These issues are with one contractor. There's also another, Miller Services, I believe, that have not experienced any of these issues. Is that correct? In fact, they're actually helping out in this case?
Yes, you're correct. Miller Waste Services has been assisting Waste Management.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we don't need a battle between public and private services.
We need the facts.
Just hold on. Before we get into, it looks like we're going to go down a path where we're trying to argue one or the other. This is not a discussion on the contracts. We've had that discussion, and we'll have the discussion in the future. Today is not about talking about who is the better contractor. In the City of Ottawa, we've had in-house team, and we've had other contractors, including Tomlinson prior, that have all provided exceptional service for the City of Ottawa for decades. It hasn't been since the 90s that we actually had a contractor just completely vacate their zone and leave the residents of that zone with no service whatsoever and no one willing to collect service in that area. In this case, we have Waste Management who is not unwilling to do the job. They've been unable to, but they've also accepted the help from the other partners, be it in-house team or Miller Waste Services. So we're not, again, this is not a debate about who provides better service. We have an issue in a zone, and we're trying to address that issue, and the contractor in that zone has been more than willing to accept the help and work with us. That's it. So, Ken Wiley, you're taking direction to come back with a report that will speak to essentially what happened, but also where we go from here and how we can avoid these situations in the future?
Correct, Chair.
Thank you. With a special sort of tip to the future RFPs on all requests for proposals on future collection contracts. All right, thank you. Thank you, staff. Appreciate your time to come out today. All right, thank you. So back to our regular agenda. So item number 3 is the financial statements for the in-house solid waste collection external audit results 2018. Oh. All right, so just before we start, I just need a motion to receive the verbal update. Is that received? Thank you. So, Marilyn, Jonathan?
Thank you. Next slide. So I'd like to provide committee with an update for curbside collection contracts, specifically the in-house collection group. So we have just signed a 3-year short-term contract, and they've been awarded to the in-house collection groups and Miller Waste. So in the future, the in-house collection groups will have zones 3 and 5, and Miller Waste will have zones 1, 2, and 4. The procurement of new collection vehicles for the in-house collection groups is in progress, and Solid Waste Services is committed to providing curbside collection that is in line with council-approved service level standards. So that's on the go forward with the new contracts. That will start on June 1st, 2020. Council approved the contracts in 2011, and as part of that approval, staff were asked to report back annually on the financial results of that year. Each year, the financial statements are audited externally, and the results of year 6, specific to Zone 5, are that we had an operating deficit of $976,999, a contractual savings, which is the difference between the city's bid and the next lowest bid, of $543,647. In year 6, the city had contractual savings of $543,000, making the overall deficit of $433,000 for Zone 5. The second column shows the savings for years 1 to 5, and the year-to-date financials show that the city had contractual savings of $3 million a deficit of $2 million for an overall savings of $1.03 million from the beginning of the contract. Solid waste services budgets are based on a CPI increases to labor, fleet, and other costs. In year 6, the revenue was increased by 0.9% or 50% of the consumer price index year to date, and this is an overall increase of 4.6%. Over the 6-year contract, labor rates have increased 11.63% and increased by 1.95% in year 6. And the fleet services labor rate is $95 for a cumulative increase of 17%. The future solid waste service standards will be developed as part of the Solid Waste Master Plan Phase 2, which will happen between Q1 2020 and Q1 2021. The objective of this phase is to begin discussions on the vision, guiding principles, objectives, and targets that will provide a framework for the Waste Management Master Plan. In Canada, all 3 levels of government have a role to play in waste management, and the city's plan will be based on the federal and provincial government who are responsible for waste reduction and waste diversion regulations, policies, and programs. Council can have confidence that the approach being recommended for developing the Waste Management Master Plan will be adaptable and flexible if and when these proposed changes come into effect. Per the memo to Council circulated on August 29, 2019, the province has made progress on the blue bin transition by identifying timelines for the transition to be completed. The transition is expected to take place in phases over a 3-year period, with producers being fully responsible for providing blue box services province-wide by the end of 2025. Details regarding how the Blue Box program will transition to the producers and what producers' relationships with municipalities will entail, including what the final service will look like and how it will operate, are still not known. Excuse me. Support the new individual producer responsibility framework for the Blue Box program. Staff will continue to be engaged in consultation with the province through the Municipal 3 Hours Collaborative Working Group, and updates on the status of provincial and federal waste legislation will be provided to Council as part of the Solid Waste Master Plan Phase 1 report in Q1 of 2020. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions from members of the committee? I'll ask one. So what, over the course of the contract, I mean, it's clearly still below what the next bid was. Zone 5, of course, Zone 3 wasn't tendered. What would you say are the contributing factors to the year-over-year change in the deficit?
The major costs are due to labor and to fleet maintenance costs. So the fleet maintenance costs have gone up exponentially as our fleet is aging. And in addition, labor costs are going up. So the contract only allows us to have CPI at 0.5%, but meanwhile, we are paying our employees full CPI. So there is an incremental, as the contract extends, that deficit gets bigger and bigger.
Did we consider that with the next 3 years?
Yes, we did. So those issues are incorporated into the bid price that we provided for the 3-year short-term contract.
So in the future, we shouldn't have sort of any large surplus deficit discrepancy between what the contract is and what is happening year end?
You are correct.
Okay. That's good. All right, thanks. Questions from any members of the committee? Seeing none? All right, thanks. I was expecting something, but nothing. So on that report, is that report received? Oh, carried, sorry. That the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water, and Waste Management recommend Council receive this report for information. So, yeah, carried, because we're asking them to receive it. So next week you can say received, but this week we say carried. Thank you. So items number 4 and 5. So item 4 is the lead pipe replacement program update. And item 5 is the 2018 Drinking Water Quality Management System Annual Management Review Report and Operational Plan. So we're going to have a presentation on both these at the same time, and then we'll vote on both at the same time as they are related. So if you don't mind just introducing yourself for committee members and the members of the public, and then.
Yes, good
Present.
morning. Thank you, Chair and committee members. My name is Ian Douglas. I'm the water quality engineer working in drinking water services, and I live and work and dream drinking water. And my colleague is here today, Aggie Motes, who is our program manager of locates, laterals, and grant programs, also in public works. We're here to share with you our strategy to try to minimize exposure to lead from tap water. Health Canada earlier this year revised the guideline for lead in drinking water, and we fully anticipate Ontario will adopt this new guideline as a standard. They may phase it in over 1 or 2 years, we're not sure, but we want to be proactive in addressing this concern. I have to, first of all, reassure you that Ottawa's tap water is lead-free. So right from the river through our treatment process into the water supply is lead-free. However, small amounts of lead can be dissolved in the water when it's transported from the water main into the house. So we're going to talk about 2 things this morning. One is our treatment strategy. How are we going to adjust the chemistry of our water to try to minimize lead exposure? And secondly, how can we support residents who wish to replace the lead service pipes that are installed supplying their home? The diagram shown here illustrates our water system. As I mentioned before, our water in Ottawa is lead-free. However, there is a small service pipe that connects the water main, typically in the street, to the home. And as water passes through that service pipe, small amounts of lead can dissolve into the tap water. As well as within the home, if people have copper plumbing with lead solder or brass components in their plumbing system, small amounts of lead, trace amounts can dissolve into their tap water. And so there are 2 components to this service pipe, so it's a little bit more complicated. The section from the water main to the property line is owned by the city. That's the public portion. However, the homeowner owns the portion from the property line to the house. So in some ways, we have a delicate dance here between city-owned infrastructure, privately owned water pipes, household plumbing, and the chemistry of the water. And all these factors can affect how much lead is in the tap water when someone drinks our excellent drinking water. So for many decades, the city has practiced what we call corrosion control. In fact, back to 1930, we've been practicing corrosion control. We purposely adjust the pH of our water to a fairly high level. It's currently 9.4. If you remember your high school chemistry, neutral pH is 7. So we adjust it to 9.4 to minimize the solubility of metals, including lead, and to protect our infrastructure, to make sure that our metal water mains will last for hopefully 100 years. In Ottawa, lead pipes were installed from the water main to the home starting in the late 1800s up until 1955. So we don't have perfect records, but we estimate about 30,000 homes, about 15% of Ottawa homes, have a lead service pipe. So it's a significant number. Research over the last 20 years has shown that lead is more of a concern than we previously thought. So Health Canada has reviewed the literature and have established a new, more stringent drinking water guideline for lead. They lowered the guideline from 10 parts per billion to 5 parts per billion. That's the lowest in the world. And they didn't do this lightly. They felt there was enough compelling evidence that particularly children, infants, pregnant women are at risk of even small amounts of lead exposure. The primary effects are cognitive effects, IQ, and neurobehavioral effects. So for that reason, they have set a new maximum acceptable concentration of 5 parts per billion. And they also put an interesting statement in the guideline. They said that something called ALARA, which means we're setting the guideline at 5, but we want you to go as low as reasonably achievable. Ideally, lead concentration from water should be 0. And as the research has been conducted in recent years, every time they look lower, they can't really find a safe low level of lead. So ultimately, the goal is 0. Over the last 15 years, we've tested about 7,000 homes in Ottawa. We've been testing lead levels for decades. And you may not know this, but every winter and every summer, we follow a protocol. We choose 100 homes in Ottawa that have lead service pipes. We specifically choose them to represent the worst case. We go into the home, usually at the kitchen tap. We have a procedure we follow. We sample the flowing water. We actually let it sit for 30 minutes to allow, if there's any metal being dissolved, to increase, and we take a series of samples. And over the last 12 years, we have met the current standard of 10 parts per billion consistently. Other cities like Toronto, London, Hamilton have not met that. But Ottawa, because of our corrosion control, has met that standard. However, with the new standard of 5, we will not meet compliance with that new standard. So here's an example of what sort of levels do we see in Ottawa taps in these homes that have lead services and in new homes. So as I mentioned before, we have 0 levels of lead in our treated water leaving the plants and in the system. So for the majority of Ottawa homes that don't have lead service pipes, the lead levels would be very low. In many cases, 0, or they might be at least less than 1 part per billion. And that's just picking up small amounts from brass fittings, copper plumbing that has lead solder, things like that. But generally very low, less than 1, often 0. However, for the 15% of Ottawa homes that have a lead service pipe, we have typically seen numbers in the range of 1 to 5 for most homes. However, there are a portion of homes for various reasons that are greater than 10 parts per billion. Typically, these are homes that have a long lead service supply pipe, might even be 50, 100 feet long. So we feel that a new corrosion control strategy is needed. We recognized this about 4 years ago, and so you may not know that we have a pilot research facility located at our BRITANNIA water purification plant. So we actually harvested lead pipes very carefully, almost like an archaeology dig, from a number of homes, brought them back to the pilot plant, and we have been conducting research for the last 4 years to look for a new method of corrosion control. We found that using a trace amount of phosphate during the water treatment process would decrease our lead levels by a further 70%. Phosphate is widely used in North America. Most recently, Toronto and Hamilton have introduced phosphate into their water. What's a little bit unique about Ottawa is that we were able to find an optimum treatment that uses a very small amount of phosphate, less than 1/3 of the typical amount that's used in other cities. The graph you see shows the effect of 3 different types of treatment. So the tall bars are the lead concentrations we saw when water sat for 30 minutes right in the lead pipe. The small bars represent water that was flowing continuously through the pipe, so just picking up a smaller amount of lead. And you'll see on the orange bars that if we didn't practice any corrosion control in Ottawa, we would have some pretty significantly high lead concentrations, especially in those homes with lead services. Using our current pH control method, which is the middle yellow bars, you can see we do somewhat better. However, for water that's stagnant in the lead service pipes, we can be even above 10 parts per billion. However, with this new proposed phosphate treatment, we're seeing numbers that are consistently below 5, and we feel in most cases we'll see numbers down in the 1 to 2 part per billion range. The phosphate that we add forms a microscopic coating that protects the pipe, and it limits the amount of lead that can dissolve into the water. In addition to minimizing lead, the phosphate also provides very important protection for our water main infrastructure. We want our water mains to last as long as possible. And it also limits the amount of metals that can dissolve in fountains. Think about schools, think about taps that have brass components. This is also a very effective way to minimize that exposure. Phosphate, some people might be concerned, well, you're adding a chemical into my water. Phosphate does not have adverse human health effects. We've been working closely with our public health department. In fact, it's a nutrient. It's an essential nutrient. Most Canadians in their daily diet get about 700 to 1,200 milligrams of phosphate per day. We're proposing to add 0.3 milligrams of phosphate into the water, so it's indeed a very trace amount. This would be a food-grade phosphate that we propose. And just as an example, if you compare to milk, for example, milk naturally has about 1,000 milligrams of phosphate per liter. In our tap water, we're proposing to add 0.3 milligrams, so it's really a negligible quantity. As far as implementing this new method, we are just starting off on our design phase of the project. We estimate about $1 million for design and engineering costs, and we estimate about $5.1 million for the construction and commissioning of the system. These costs were included in the approved 2019 budget. As far as operating costs, the main increased operating cost would be for the chemical, and so we expect that to be in the range of $400,000 per year. That represents about 10% of our current chemical budget. And as far as timelines, we hope that we would be implementing this new strategy in 2021, possibly 2022. So in addition to the chemistry change that we're proposing, there are some things that residents can do to limit their exposure to lead in their tap water. The simplest thing is flushing your tap. You saw in the graph, you saw the size of the tall bars versus the small bars. So simply flushing your tap even until it turns cold for a minute or two will lower that level from that high amount down to a fairly low level. It costs about 2 cents to run your tap for 2 minutes, flat out. In the morning, for example, and you can put that in your refrigerator and use it during the day. Another thing residents can do is to use a filter, even a pour-through filter. It's very effective at reducing lead. We've tested 4 commercial filters off the shelf, and they were all very effective at removing lead. There is one filter that is certified for lead removal and very effective. And the last thing that a resident can do, 2 more things. One is to get their water tested. So we offer free testing. We'll come into their home and see if there are lead levels of concern in your home. By phoning 311, we can arrange for that testing. And last but not least, perhaps most importantly, is to encourage residents to remove these lead service pipes where possible. And so we have a program to help residents do that, and we're proposing some changes to improve that program. At this point, I'll let Aggie explain those changes.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Chair. The lead pipe replacement program started in 2006 as a pilot project to protect public health by replacing lead water service pipes. The program assists homeowners with the replacement of lead service pipes by hiring and managing the contractor and reducing the financial impact of the replacement by offering a deferred payment option on the property tax bill. The program currently has a $1 million annual budget. Under the current program, property owners are eligible if both their private and public portions are lead. The city is planning capital rehabilitation work on the public portion, or the city has replaced the public portion less than 2 years from the date that the property owner will complete their work. Qualified homeowners are eligible for a loan through their tax bill if they require financial support for the cost of the work. Since the program started in 2006, however, there have been less than 5%, or approximately 1,070 homeowners of the estimated 30,000 private urban lead services that have been replaced. The program has historically underspent and currently distributes approximately half of the available funds each year. Due to low participation rates and anticipating the changes to Health Canada's guidelines for allowable levels of lead in drinking water, a program review was conducted, and the program review revealed that the eligibility criteria was likely the key contributor to low participation. A key demographic was being excluded from the program, specifically owners with a private lead service only. This demographic represents approximately 30% of the applications received under the current program during the past 5 years. So in order to increase the participation in the program and to mitigate public health impacts of lead in drinking water, the following program enhancements are recommended. That the city offer a rebate of up to $1,000 to homeowners to have only their private lead service replaced. That the city implement a new stopgap measure by offering impacted residents a filter kit consisting of NSF 53 certified water filters and a pitcher to remove lead from the drinking water at no cost to the resident. Homeowners would be eligible for this filter program for approximately 1 year's worth of filters if city water tests confirm that their lead levels exceed the new Health Canada guideline, or if the property owner has applied to the lead pipe replacement program for either the rebate or loan option. And lastly, to continue the current loan option for property owners with both public and private lead services, but limit the loan repayment period to 5 years if the cost of the work is less than $5,000, and to 10 years if the cost of the work is over $5,000. The program enhancements recommended would make the program more accessible, support the replacement of lead infrastructure, and align our program with the new Health Canada guidelines on lead levels in drinking water. In addition, limiting the loan repayment period will improve the city's ability to plan future work, since funds will be repaid within a predictable time frame and be automatically reinvested into the program. Finally, a stopgap measure will protect public health by giving residents an option to implement promptly to reduce their exposure to lead in drinking water. All enhancements will occur within the current budget, and participation rates will continue to be monitored. If rates drastically increase, households with children aged 6 and under and expectant mothers would be prioritized. The new rebate and filter distribution will launch in Q2 of 2020 in time for the summer construction season. And to encourage the approximately 30,000 households in Ottawa who may be impacted by lead service pipes to participate in the program, the Keep Your Tap Water Lead-Free brochure will be sent to those homes, giving them information on the program and how to get their water tested. We're also adding a notification on the water bill referring them to the program website. Thank you for your time, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and just a reminder to members of the committee that both items 4 and 5 are on the table right now. So if you do have any questions on the drinking water quality report, you can do that as well. Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you for the presentation and all the work you've done, and you met with me beforehand and briefed me. That was great. I just wanted to jump in on a couple things with regard to the communication for the lead pipes for people that may have them still. There's a lot of them in the old city of Ottawa. My ward has a lot of lead pipes still. So all the owners that, or the households that have lead pipes on the public servicing side will receive a notice, or will everybody receive a notice that this program's now available on their tax bill?
Thank you, Chair. Everyone that has a home that was built prior to 1955 will receive a brochure unless they've already participated in the program.
Okay, fantastic. And they won't be able to know if they have lead pipes still on their the public portion of their area. I guess that they'd have to inquire about that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. They can inquire through 311, and based on the age of the water main on their street, they can infer whether the public side has been replaced or not. And the website also has some recommendations on how they can check their own private service at their meter, whether it is lead or not.
Okay, perfect, thank you. We also talked a little bit about schools as well. So the school boards are responsible for their own, I guess, amelioration or remediation of this if it exists. And what is our responsibility with that? Is it just the public pipes going in, or what?
Yeah, that's a great question. None of the schools in Ottawa have lead service pipes, because they're larger pipes and they only made lead up to about 5/8, maybe 1 inch. So, however, within the schools, there certainly is lead solder. There are fountains that have lead lining. There can be brass fixtures that contribute lead. So the province requires that the school boards conduct testing at every point of consumption in every school. This is a fairly new regulation, and it's been fairly onerous for the school boards. I think you would agree it's the right thing to do. We have a vulnerable population. So if a fountain is tested and it exceeds the standard, it usually gets flagged, signs go up, and they either replace the fountain and get it retested, or at least warn the students not to use that fountain. So that is done by the school boards, regulated by the province for every school and every daycare in Ontario. And oversight for that program is provided by Ottawa Public Health.
Right.
What's our role in that? The chemistry of the water is a role in that. And we feel that the phosphate method we talked about will further reduce even the school levels that have been observed.
Okay, that's very helpful. Yeah, just when I was a trustee, I remember seeing a list of the lead in some of our schools that was being captured, and it was surprising, some of the schools that had it. But you're saying that they'll actually condemn the water fountain or put up signs around that water fountain?
That's correct. They'll usually put a hood over the fountain until such time that they can replace the fountain.
Okay.
And it's every point of consumption within the school. They have a 2-year period to do that testing.
Okay, great. When will the phosphate start to be added to public drinking water? What is the timeline?
So it depends somewhat on the design and construction project, but we expect 2021, possibly into 2022, that we would be adding the phosphate. We would be also reaching out to the public to inform them of it, and also talking to interest groups such as dialysis clinics, anyone that, pet owners that are concerned about water quality and any effects.
Okay.
So there'll be an outreach as part of that.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming to my office ahead of time. I mentioned that in 2006, I lived in a house that was built in 1945, and when I tried to get on the list at that time, it was a huge waiting list, and we were just, it was very problematic. And I was told that unless I was pregnant, I could not be moved up the list. And so, despite my best efforts, I did not succeed to get lead pipe changes. What is it that's changed since 2006 that in terms of now that the program seems to be much quicker to get that service?
Thank you, Chair. So In 2006 and 2007, there was an extensive outreach campaign, so it definitely piqued interest at that time. And since then, participation has definitely decreased. We think that many residents aren't aware of the program right now, and many older residents, in fact, weren't interested in the program because they felt it didn't directly impact them. Now, because we're expanding the criteria, we may get an initial spike in interest. We can reevaluate the budget ask at that point. So we're asking for delegated authority to make changes to the program as participation changes.
I might just add
So there's
too
no
that-
waiting list?
Right now, there's no waiting list. There may be a waiting list, and we will prioritize, again, the same way with the young children and expectant mothers. But because in 2006 it was a pilot program, we didn't know if it would be continuing. Now we anticipate that the program will continue for a number of years.
I was just going to add that we also hope to get out as quickly as we can to test water. And if we find levels that exceed the Health Canada standard, we'll be providing a filter on an interim basis for people to protect themselves in the short term while they're waiting to get on the program.
Thank
And there
you.
may be increased interest. Flint, Michigan was certainly, very important event and well followed. The fact that Health Canada is lowering the standard out of concern, there might be greater knowledge and awareness for this issue at this time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Egley.
Yeah, so about the program, I'm a little confused. So if city pipes and private pipes are both lead, you can be eligible for a loan. But if it's only your piping, you're only eligible for a rebate up to $1,000. What's the average cost of fixing the problem?
Thank you, Chair. The average cost for a lead pipe replacement is between $2,000 and $5,000, and it varies greatly based on the length of the pipe.
So what's the rationale for not allowing a loan to someone who just has private pipes? They've got the same problem, we have the same concerns, their health is at risk, so why are we making that differentiation?
Thank you, Chair. For work that is done both on public and private property, there are city staff that manage that work, and it's a single contractor that does the entire work. The homeowner pays for the private portion, but they do take advantage to some economies for common trenching that would be present in that case. If only the private service is being replaced, that is the case where we're offering a rebate option. In that case, the city does not get involved in contracting because it's entirely on private property. So the rebate in that case would cover trenching and lead pipe replacement. So if the city's not involved, we have to change the manner in which we reimburse costs.
Okay, I'm still not understanding you. You told me the average price is $3,000 to $5,000, I think?
Mm-hmm.
That's whether it's private or public.
That's the entire cost.
Right, so you still haven't explained to me why we're only funding a portion of it if it's private when the people are at the same risk.
Okay, sorry about that. The funding level for the rebate option was benchmarked against other municipalities and is in line with other programs that we have within the city, and it is a portion of the cost of the total replacement fee.
Okay, don't mean to be difficult, but you're still not answering the question. The people have the same risk.
Yes.
They're all our residents. We have a responsibility for them. Why are we only funding less if it's privately serviced as opposed to, I'm not understanding. Why don't we just give everybody the same option for financing to fix the same problem? I don't really care what other cities are doing. These are our residents that I'm concerned about. So I'd really like to understand why we're treating some residents at this level and other residents with the same risk at that level.
Thank you, Chair. So it actually turns out to be very similar in terms of the level of reimbursement that they get. The amount of savings that they get when both the public and private portion are replaced would be equivalent to the rebate option that they would get if only the private side is replaced. So the city takes on more of the costs when the entire portion is replaced. So what the owners are paying is lower when the entire service portion is replaced. Does that make sense?
No,
No.
no, I'm sorry. I'm still confused.
So essentially, it costs more because the city owns some of the pipe and we're replacing it all. So we replace our pipe and their pipe.
That's right.
So the cost to the homeowner is the same, whether it's public or private.
Essentially.
So if I can dumb it down for me, so the loans that people are asking for or we're giving are $1,000 or so?
Again, it depends on the length of the service pipe.
I
But
mean,
it-
my
it
only
varies.
concern is that we're treating all our residents who have the same risk with the same approach. So if you can assure me that's the case, then I'll be quiet, but that's what my concern is. I don't want to see certain residents treated differently.
I think Kevin Wiley wants to assure you that that's the case.
Yes, I do, Chair. So if I can say, I think what we're talking about, two different mechanisms, but residents are treated fairly in both cases and similar.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to be difficult, but I'm going to be difficult. If you're going to be difficult, just say you're going to be difficult. Don't say, I don't want to be difficult. We know you want to be difficult. Anyways. Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the informative session that you provided my office. It was very informative, and it will allow us to bring back a lot of useful information to our residents so that they can tap into the program. I had a slightly technical question since we were going into some technicalities during that briefing. And it might be comparing apples to oranges, but you know, I've been made aware that Toronto has been adding phosphate at a rate of 3 milligrams per liter and is adjusting that downwards. I guess in this report, we're adding, or we're proposing to add phosphate at 0.3 milligrams per liter. And I was just wondering, what are the technical differences? I know you might not have the information about Toronto offhand, but why are we adding a smaller proportion to our water?
So there's one thing I need to correct. When they say 3 milligrams per liter, they're expressing that as PO4 phosphate. The units I was using today are milligrams of P, phosphorus, elemental phosphorus. So it's just a nomenclature thing. When they're adding 3 milligrams per liter in Toronto, in our nomenclature, it's 1.
Okay.
So the apples to oranges, or apples to apples, is Toronto's adding 1 milligram phosphate as P. We're proposing to add 0.3. And what allows us to go to that much lower level is someone from the US EPA, who's an expert in corrosion, had a researcher who noticed that at an elevated pH, they found this little sweet spot where they could use much lower phosphate and get the same effect. And Ottawa's water is very soft, and so for us to operate at a high pH is affordable. Lake Ontario is a much harder and higher alkaline water, and they couldn't afford to operate at a pH of 8 or 9 like we do. So that option wouldn't really be available for Toronto. But that option was only really uncovered during the research study, and it's a fairly new finding.
Excellent, thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Any other questions for staff on this? Any questions on the drinking water quality report? Yeah, sure. Councillor Hubely?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to indulge me for a minute. I'm one of the councillors that like to point out the high quality of our water here in the city. And I think what this gentleman just told us was another bonus for Ottawa Water, but I think to communicate that better to residents, I'd almost need a graphic to get that message across about the similarities with them, because it does, if I hear you correctly, we have much better water than Toronto, which is the message that we've been putting out for years. So,
Well, if I could comment, you know, I work in a very cooperative industry with all of my water utility colleagues across the country. So we're careful to say that one is better, but I can tell you that I know Ottawa's water intimately, and it is excellent water quality. So I fully agree with supporting and encouraging and promoting Ottawa's tap water. It's one of the best in the world, I can say that honestly, and we want to encourage people to use it and use it with pride and confidence.
Thank you. Whereas I don't work with water quality specialists across the province, so I can say that ours is better than Toronto's. And if I can't say it, I'm protected by this whole like privilege thing. This is because I am a city councillor and it's in this room. If I said that out in the hallway, I could get sued, but I'm okay in here. All right, so on the two, so I'll just, let me, hold on, back to my agenda. So item 4, that the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management recommend that Council, 1, approve the proposed changes to the lead pipe replacement program as outlined in this report, and 2, delegate authority to the General Manager, Public Works and Environmental Services to make further updates to the lead pipe replacement program within the approved budget as required. Is that item carried? And item 5, 2018 Drinking Water Quality Management Report, that the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management recommend the Council, 1, receive the 2018 Drinking Water Quality Management System Annual Manager Review Report, and 2, endorse the Drinking Water Quality Management System Operational Plan. Thank you. So we have one, another added item that we just want to tack on to the end here. I'm just going to ask Council. It's about the this committee and Council approved a waste master plan sponsors group, which consists of myself and Councillor Menard as the chair and vice chair of this committee. But then we also solicited interest from other members of council to beyond that. And we have a motion we had a lot of interest, so 6 members of council were interested, so I appreciate that interest. We had to narrow it down to 2, so I just want to ask Councillor Menard to present that motion.
Thanks very much, Chair. And given your introduction, I won't read the whereas clauses.
Appreciate it.
Just stick to the therefore be it resolved that the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management recommend Council approve the following membership for the Solid Waste Council Sponsors Group: Councillor Eli L. Chantieri and Councillor Laura Dudas.
So it's because they paid me more. So is that item carried? Carried, thank you. All right, so in-camera items, none. Information previously distributed. There's a report on the use of delegated authority by Public Works, the conference attendance, renewable cities, and Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee reserve appointments. Notice of motion, none. Inquiries, none. Other business, none. Adjournment? Carried. Carried. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, October 15th, 2019. Thank you.